Hi everyone, this video is going to be about Twitter. On my last channel, I put up a video explaining my decision to delete my Twitter account at the time. Except later, I forget however long later, 3 or 4 weeks later, I would only end up going back onto Twitter again, creating a new account. It just seems that I couldn't shake off the addiction of being plugged into the 24-hour news cycle. I just got bored and I needed to see more of those stories and engage with all those people again. And that's not even the first time I've done this. There have been many times throughout, at least 3 or 4 times throughout my life, I've created a Twitter account only to resolve no longer to use it again, and to delete it, only to do the same thing again. Except a few days ago, I deleted my Twitter account for what may well be the final time, because I had an experience which, for me, it felt like the straw that broke the camel's back. I've had enough of this website. It's not making me a wiser and more compassionate person. It's not making me a smarter and more intelligent person. It's turning me into a person that I no longer recognize. So what was the post that I saw? Well, I'll show you the post. It was a thread, actually, by this user here. Now this thread, I first came across it 3 or 4 days ago, and the first time I remember seeing it, I didn't really think much of it because I didn't know what the context was or what it was about, so I scrolled past. But then I kept seeing it being reposted in my feed at least a handful of times, and it got to the point where I got curious, so I decided to actually read into it and see what it was all about. And as you can see, the tweet purportedly shows the view from a very tall bridge in the middle of the night, followed up in the thread with a message implying that the user is about to jump from the bridge. Incidentally, the Twitter user is, or was, transgender. Now, the first thing I need to get out of the way, we could probably divide this video into 2 parts, but here's going to be the first part. What are my thoughts on transgender ideology and the LGBT community? Well, I'm not a big fan. The LGBT lobby is an abomination. It's a completely artificial identity created by elite academics. Honestly, I think it was invented to divide and confuse Western civilization. It was devised with the sole purpose of making a whole crop of younger people confused and unsure about their identity, and severing the bonds that exist between us, so that we can no longer function as part of a community and in a society. Some of the key proponents of this LGBT ideology are really seedy and messed up individuals who've done some really sick things. You wouldn't believe the amount of stories that I keep reading about with stuff like this. And trans ideology, the trans community, transsexualism, whatever you'd rather it be called, it needs to be recognized for what it is: a mental illness. If you're born with a set of male reproductive organs and you somehow come to the conclusion that you're not male but you're actually a female, in spite of clear evidence to the contrary, that is a delusion. How did we ever get to the point where we no longer recognize that as a psychological delusion? If a man thinks that he is Jesus Christ, or he is actually God, and he walks around demanding that people recognize him as such, we recognize rightly that he has some kind of delusion. And there's all kinds of crazy delusions that exist. I mean, there's one such example is Cotard's syndrome, where people literally believe they are dead. They believe that their bodies are lifeless, and some of them actually complain that they feel like they're rotting from the inside. Now, we all recognize these other delusions as delusions, but for some reason, when an adult male, or in this case, a teenage boy, somehow believes that he's not a boy or a man, but actually a woman, we don't look at the most obvious prognosis. Anyway, trans people, they need help. And understand here, when I say they need help, I'm not talking about social acceptance or any of the nonsense that the LGBT community keeps talking about. That's what I refer to as validation, and that's not the same thing. I mean, they need actual counseling. They need their brains to be scanned to see if there might be something wrong with them. Because the funny thing is about a lot of young people who turn out to be trans, there's a surprising number of things stand out. I mean, for one, a lot of them happen to be on the spectrum. A lot of them are autistic. And even more surprising, a lot of them tend to be left-handed, which I found very surprising, because I didn't think there was a link between which dominant hand you used and there being a link with you being transgender. But there you go. I mean, the research and the study of trans identity, as it's now called, is still evolving. But it is a harmful idea because it's a delusion and it's not based in reality. I've always believed that as somebody who's suffered from mental illness for a very long time, the etiology, the mental illness is something that's very hard to understand, because a lot of the time, the causes, the underlying causes and symptoms, they seem particular to the individual. And each case is different. But if you have a set of beliefs about yourself and about the world, which are based on lies and they're not rooted in reality, and you live your life with this false set of expectations, that is a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for lifelong depression that's never going to be fixed, because no matter what you do, you can identify however you choose, but nature is nature. I've seen so many examples of trans men dressing as women on the internet. I even remember meeting a few of them when I went to the university. None of us are fooled. You don't look like women. None of you sound like women. And if you really want to help people, you got to tell them the truth. And that's the difference between giving people the help they need and validation. In case I haven't made that clear. So anyway, those are my views on the LGBT lobby and trans people. I've got no personal hate against trans people, as long as they haven't done anything morally questionable, as long as they haven't victimized any other people, and it's only themselves that they end up harming. Really, I feel nothing but compassion towards them. And I used to know a lot of them on Discord. So, having gotten that out the way, I now want to talk about the Twitter post that I saw just now, just a few days ago, because it made me realize a couple things about myself, which I don't think I'd ever have actually it gave me an opportunity to pause and reflect like nothing else had in quite a while. And it made me realize some uncomfortable truths about myself. It actually made me stop and think. So, as you can see here in this thread, it's an image from somebody standing atop a tall bridge with this caption written here. Now, normally on the internet, whenever you're presented with somebody threatening to end their own lives, you normally learn to take these things with a pinch of salt, because lots of people threaten to end their own lives, and you're never sure what the context is behind the story, and a lot of them are impossible to verify anyway. So I can understand if people might have at first been originally dismissive or skeptical, except this was different, because I actually took the time to investigate and look at and find out and research who the Twitter user was and find if there were any updates. And I can confirm that he did indeed end his own life shortly after posting that. There's a news article. He was a 14-year-old transgender child. I don't know his real birth name, but his trans name was Charlotte. And for some very peculiar reason, for some reason I'm really not quite sure about even now, this thread exploded and went viral. Last I remember, it had well over 30 million views. I think it has more than double that at the time of me recording this video. And it went viral for all the wrong reasons. Now, some of the comments, a minority of them perhaps, were supportive and kind and sensible, I would say. But many of them were not. And I'm just going to show you some of the examples that I saw there. All right. I've already made this clear what my views are on trans ideology, the LGBT lobby. I'm a centre-left white nationalist, and I believe this ideology is toxic and harmful, especially to young people, because it's disproportionately the younger generation who are likely to believe these things. It's a form of social contagion brought about through state propaganda and social conditioning, and it needs to be contained, and it needs to be seen for what it is, a delusion. Anyway, these people need help. But what I saw, it disgusted me. I don't find any of this funny. I couldn't. I've spent pretty much the entirety of my 20s lapsing in and out of depression. I came close to thinking of actually making plans to end my life 5 years ago, and I still think about it even now. So there's absolutely no way I could ever laugh at something like this. Reading those tweets, reading the replies in the thread, it left an awful taste in my mouth, and it actually made me stop and freeze, because for the moment I couldn't suspend. I had to actually stop and for a moment and study what I was looking at. I lack the imagination, perhaps, and the theory of mind to know why anyone would feel compelled to make light of another person's suffering. This was a 17-year-old boy. This was a deeply confused and miserable 17-year-old boy, sorry. And it's not clear from the context of this post why he specifically chose to end his life there and then. It's not like he left an elaborate note giving his reasons, so we can really only speculate but it's highly likely that his identity as a trans boy most likely played a role in it. And there are things on this planet. There are things worse than death. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. There are many things that are so intolerable to the human condition that we would rather jump off a bridge. We would rather put a rope around our necks than have to endure. And one example, I don't know if this was the exact reason why he elected to do it, but I think this might have played something of a role, is the sense of helplessness and futility, or a sense of worthlessness. Like, nothing you do ever makes a difference. People don't really appreciate or respect you. Life just doesn't turn out the way you want it to. And no matter what you do, nothing ever goes right. Now that's quite a broad, slew of thoughts that I gave right there, but I imagine a lot of people who have historically ended their lives must have done so for one of those thoughts I just mentioned. And for any of you, for all those people who left those messages, who shared those little memes, all those pictures, making fun of this kid, what the hell is wrong with you? You think this is funny? For the love of God, get off your computer, go into the bathroom, look straight in the bathroom mirror, and tell me what you see. Look at your reflection. Is that who you really are? You're being manipulated. You're being brainwashed. You're being taken advantage of by an algorithm that is presenting you with these out of context, outrageous stories in an attempt to elicit visceral disgust and outrage from you, and derision and mockery towards other people, all in an attempt to drive up profit margins and raise shareholder value. Are you pleased with yourself? How the hell did we get to this point? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt like I'd fallen asleep and woken up in an episode of The Twilight Zone or something. And it was disturbing for a number of reasons. As I mentioned earlier, I was so caught up in the maelstrom of emotions. I was so frozen in time at what I saw. I had to study it for a moment. I clicked on some of the accounts that were leaving some of the worst messages, the main offenders. Some of the accounts were actually big accounts, and some of whom I actually followed, and a few of them were people who I actually really respected and looked up to, who really should have known better. But what I found striking about a lot of the other ones, some of these other people leaving these messages, I tried clicking on their Twitter profiles because I wanted to see what kind of people they were. I wanted to see where they were coming from, to see if I could discern what their views on life or death were, in the hopes that I could probably get a clue as to what would motivate them to leave such callous messages, and I found nothing. Well, nothing I could work with. Their profiles and their tweets were laden with semi-literate nonsense. These are I suppose you might call these people chronically online types. Like people who have nothing better to do. And at that point, I began to do a bit of reflecting and deep diving into my own shadow. I went on my own Twitter account and I looked at my own tweet history, and I came to a horrifying realization. I was part of the problem. I can't recall exactly if I've ever left similarly callous or heartless messages in response to people's deaths, but I've seen all kinds of disturbing shit on the Twitter feed before. I mean, snuff videos of people standing on a railroad track getting run over by trains. And essentially, I began to realize that this is what Twitter is doing, not just to me, but this is the effect it's having on all of us. It's turning us, it's stripping us of our humanity. It is, how can I put this? It's making us detached and aloof from other people's suffering. It's bringing out the worst in all of us. I'd seen, and I knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd known this for quite some time. I'd seen plenty of disturbing videos, and some of which were probably from 4chan or reposted from elsewhere, which I felt mildly uncomfortable at, but chose to conveniently ignore, because it didn't reach the point where oh, hello there. Sorry, just the dog. Except I thought I could handle it because I hadn't had enough yet. But it was that one tweet that I saw. It was this thread. It took me until then to realize that I'd had enough. Now, I don't know where this leaves me. The problem with Twitter is, ever since Elon Musk took over the platform, now Twitter was certainly by no means, it was certainly not a perfect place before Elon Musk's takeover. But when Elon Musk took over, it changed because for the first time, it gave a platform, an open voice to people who previously had nowhere else to turn. People with viewpoints who had previously been suppressed and put underground. And I feel really conflicted about this because on the one hand, most of the traditional media is biased. You're not getting the truth from the mainstream news like BBC, Channel 4, or ITV, or CNN, because while they do present some of the facts, they do it in a really biased, selective, and curated way. So you're only receiving some of the facts. And that's not when you're receiving outright lies or hoaxes. And it gives a completely false representation of what's going on in the world. So that's why I convinced myself I need to start using Twitter, because this is where the real conversation is. There's a lot of people on Twitter with views and opinions who I really look up to and respect, and each time a story breaks out, I want to know what their thoughts are, so I can formulate I don't really trust my own judgment, but I'm sure I can look to them for answers and for pointers. But this incident taught me that I can't handle Twitter. For the sake of my own mental health, I need to stay away from that accursed website. It's a cacophonic deluge of unhealthy and unsavory opinions, and the more time I spend using it, the more it's not making me, as I've said this, it's not making me a more worldly, a more wise, a more intelligent and intellectually curious person. It's having the opposite effect for me. It was making me more neurotic, more paranoid, more viscerally angry, A lot of the stories that I came across there were ones I probably never would have heard about, where had I got my news from alternative, sources like, say, the TV or whatever. Now, people might say, but surely the best way to challenge your own biases, the best way to become more wise and more balanced and nuanced in your views is open your mind and look at different sources and evaluate the facts. Well, that may well work for some people, but it does not work for me. It's had the opposite effect. It's made me more single-minded, it's made me more narrow-minded, and it's made me more hateful, and it's made me more ignorant. And I can't use it anymore. It's like a tsunami of shit. That's what Twitter is. And I know that if I continue to use that website again, the same thing will happen again. And I'll never learn from my mistakes. To be honest, I think I would rather literally pay someone to have a Twitter handle for me and use it for my purpose rather than me do it myself. Because I feel allergic to it. And it's stories like this that remind me of why. And another thing I wanna add is there were lots of people in that thread who perhaps they thought they were well-meaning. These are, trans lobby activists, people with the pride flag in their bio, etc., who were blaming those on the dissident right for being heartless and bullying this poor transgender child. I'm not fooled. You guys, let's be clear, trans people are not above this kind of thing either. But look, we both know that those same people, they are probably most likely the same ones who laughed and cheered when Derek Chauvin got attacked in prison, or the ones who groaned and held their hands up to their face when there was that failed assassination attempt at Donald Trump. So I'm not buying that these people are compassionate and those on the dissident right aren't. If anything, what I saw, Twitter's really only a symptom of the real problem. The real problem is that there is a global sort of bifurcation. There's a new frontier. There's a new division that's happening between what we may recognize, broadly speaking, as two distinct camps. There's the leftists, the globalists, pro-open borders, pro-LGBT, pro-diversity, etc., etc. And then there's the dissident right, the nationalists, the ones who are pro-borders and anti-LGBT, pro-family, pro-marriage, that sort of thing. Now, even though I would describe myself as belonging to the latter camp, I don't find it acceptable to ever laugh at the story of a deeply mentally disturbed young boy who's lost everything and the will to live and who's decided to end his own life. If you think that kind of thing is acceptable, then honestly, in my opinion, you're just as mentally disturbed as the very people who you're laughing at. Both of those people, honestly, need to go see a doctor. Alright, well, I tried giving out multiple takes of this video, and I'm probably never going to be happy with the final take. But anyway, that was an important thing I felt I needed to get off my chest. Now, you can call me... Now, whatever your comments are on this video, go right ahead. you can say whatever you want, but call me transphobic or a hypocrite or whatever, but I know what my views are. I know where I stand on this matter. I take a principled stance, basically against laughing at people who have lost everything. That's something that I just can't get behind. I don't care who you are. I don't care who the other person is. It's never... Suicide is no joke. Mental illness is... It really hits different when you... It's a personal matter for me, and I feel like it should be handled a lot more delicately. Personally, I feel that the whole thread needs to be deleted. The people who left those messages, I think they ought to get a knock on the door from the police and perhaps a caution. I believe in free speech, but, well, actually, I have my views on that. Anyway, I felt it was important to get this off my chest. Don't laugh at people who kill themselves. It's not funny. You're never going to convince me that that's funny. Especially not a teenager. It's not funny. Anyway, you guys take care. This has been Tracking.